This was a phase when Bethesda could do no wrong. Everything they touched turned to gold. All three of these games are at that level where you have to look really hard to find anything wrong with them. That's the reason this comparison is exciting. Three top tier games in Fallout 3, New Vegas and Skyrim going against each other. Let's start things off with Fallout 3, a game so good people have been trying to recapture its magic for a good decade and well mostly failed. The green tinted wasteland is to games what Paris is to travel destinations. Calling them iconic is an understatement. The wasteland might seem empty, and frankly it kind of is, but make no mistake, once you get in, it's near impossible to get yourself out. It's as immersive as a video game location can get. As we go through these three games, you'll notice a trend. Bethesda is kind of a savant when it comes to world building, and it's not that they are the best at building the actual physical world. I think Ubisoft and Rockstar do it better, but there are very few developers who even come close to Bethesda in terms of immersiveness. The world is only as interesting as the people in it, and people in Fallout 3 are interesting at the barest minimum.
Friendly and well-mannered. I think we're gonna get along just fine. You treat my people nice, and you're welcome to stay as long as you'd like.
You start the game as an infant, control them as a toddler, adolescent and teenager within the first couple of hours of the game. That sounds really good, doesn't it? But it's slightly less interesting because, well, you're stuck in a wall talking to people who you know nothing about and chasing roaches with a BB gun. I might be in the minority, but the game isn't at its best for the first hour or so. Still better than most prologues, but what comes next is definitely better. Skyrim is the godfather of fantasy games. Many feel Oblivion or Morrowind are the best in the Elder Scrolls series, but I firmly believe Skyrim is the game where everything clicked. An amazing game world? Check. Arguably the best soundtrack in a game? Check. Stunning visuals and smooth performance? Check. And most of all, the random meetings, Sidequest and adventures that it takes you on is on a league of its own. The game starts off really strong. The protagonist is on their way to the chopping block when a dragon shows up. What's so great about a dragon in a fantasy game, you ask? Apparently, it is a big deal in the world of Skyrim, as everyone you meet and run errands for in the first few hours of the game has something similar to this to say.
What? A dragon? In Helgen? That explains what I saw earlier, flying down the valley from the south. I was hoping I was wrong about what I thought it was.
But once again, the prologue might be special, but what comes next is even better. Fallout New Vegas initially felt like a DLC to 3. Not a DLC per se, but kind of a half sequel. But many consider New Vegas to be a better, more polished version of 3. A better Fallout and a better game overall. Yeah, it does borrow a few things, but does it beat 3 at its own game? Let's see. I have always said if you love New Vegas, you love 3 and vice versa. But even the best copy won't be better than the original. I'm not saying it's a copy at all. New Vegas innovates a ton on its own. Even with a few borrowed elements, it more than stands on its own. The game world, for example, might be the best or second best thing Bethesda have ever made. The game has a subdued start compared to the other two, but what it does really well is get you into the world almost instantly, so you get to Fallouting as soon as possible.
I came up here to draw water, but here, you should have what I got. You look thirsty.
If there is one thing that makes these games so great, it's Sidequest. The ability to make the entire map feel lived in is something Bethesda are truly special at. In most games, there's an area or two where literally nothing's going on. Maybe you go there once as part of a story mission, then that area is forgotten about. Its sole purpose, bulking up the map. Modern games have gotten a lot better at this aspect, but even the latest game in this comparison is a decade old. But what's even more impressive is Bethesda did this almost 2 decades ago with Morrowind and Oblivion a little later on. Not as well as Skyrim, some of you may disagree, but I think we all can agree that they were head and shoulders above every title of that time. Just talking about this makes me so excited for Elder Scrolls 6. But which of these three do it better? If I had to pick the game with the most adventures taking you to every place you can imagine, it's Skyrim. But it does that in the means of fetch quests, which can be annoying. Which game has the more interesting characters? I think it's Fallout 3, but New Vegas is a happy medium. The game has a greater, more intriguing variety of missions, it feels a lot less repetitive than the other two. If you play these games for an hour each, you might go with Skyrim. But the more hours you put into each game, New Vegas starts looking really good. Purely because of how repetitive the other two can feel. Just to make it clear, I'm not talking about a few hours of game time later, but a few dozen or even a few hundred hours later. Skyrim doesn't get stale in any shape or form until then. Since these are RPGs, arguably two of the greatest RPG series ever, let's see how good of a role-playing experience they deliver. Fallout 3 is all about giving the player freedom to create their own path. Many games have that tagline, but very few deliver. The game not only gives you options on how you want to go about things, but also which way you want to proceed. Some missions vary greatly depending on your decisions, and it's not like the options are do you want to go this way or come charging down the hill. Decisions are meaningful and very complex to the point you genuinely have a hard time deciding on what to do. RPGs like The Witcher 3 have meaningful options, but there are very few instances where you have to really think to decide on something. Most often one option is the obvious answer, the rest are there to give you the illusion of options.
Fine, I'll help you. Just been a few days since the battle. Chances we find your brother alive are slim. Very slim.
New Vegas does what 3 does, but somehow it's not as good. Here most of the options are do you want to go this way or that. There are still some good ones that you cannot decide on, but there are more mundane decisions in 3. Because of that, the game can feel more linear. Most of Skyrim's dialogue options are questions. If you love the world and you want to know more about its history, characters, places and all that, then it's alright. But there are only a handful of moral decisions which are often the most interesting. There are some that are so infuriating you skip them altogether. For example, you're forced into a side quest that you didn't want to go through with. The dialogue options are how do I do that, where do I have to go, when do I have to go, who will I meet there. Dialogue options decisions are interesting if you care about the world and the lore behind it.
Straight to the point, eh? No need for tedious hows and whys. I like that. Leave those details to your betters, am I right?
Even after saying all that, Skyrim and Fallout 3 are neck and neck in terms of RPG mechanics. So it's a tie. Let's talk about the actual gameplay now. This is kind of the weak link of Bethesda. Since every other part is great, gameplay gets somewhat of a pass. Fallout 3 and New Vegas are pretty much the same. Gunplay can be shaky at times, which is basically the only main thing you'll be doing. Skyrim is a little different. The game is leagues ahead of Fallout if you ask me. The sheer amount of skills and gameplay elements, fighting, lockpicking, magic to name a few, and most of them have decent gameplay too. Skyrim is a clear winner here. If I had to pick between 3 and New Vegas, I think I'll go with New Vegas. It has all the things 3 has and it's better at most things. A lot less clunky, more polished, more functional, and a lot less frustrating. Since these games did come out close to each other, let's compare their visuals as well. Graphics aren't everything, but they do matter. Fallout games are never acknowledged for their graphics. I have said this countless times, but it all comes down to the green tint. Make no mistake, that style made the game stand out, but the problem with everything looking green is, well, everything looks green. New Vegas is a lot more neutral when it comes down to the color palette, but even then colors are subdued. Both these games don't try to look pretty. There are no fancy sceneries or lens flares every 10 seconds, but that makes sense considering the game is set in a wasteland. I still don't know for sure how I feel. On one hand, these games haven't aged all that well, and the fact that they weren't anything special to begin with definitely doesn't help. But on the other hand, the unique visual style is kind of the reason Fallout 3 is so iconic. Skyrim is better, but not by much. These remasters have skewed our opinions. On the Xbox 360, the game looked decent, but just above average for a AAA game. Games like L.A. Noire or Mafia 3, which came out a year before, look way better. I don't think Bethesda pay a lot of attention to the way their game looks. Every one of their titles in the last 12-13 years have been above average at best. So even though Skyrim is the better looking game among the 3, it's not anything special. So after all that, I think Skyrim is Bethesda's best game. I love Oblivion, Morrowind, Fallout 3, New Vegas and even 4 to a certain degree, but I do think Skyrim is better. I just hope in a few years, or going by the trend a few decades later, we can say Elder Scrolls 6 is the best game made by Bethesda with a straight face. Hope you enjoyed this one. Make sure to subscribe. If you really want to support the channel, become a Patreon member. It means a lot. Thanks for watching and see you next time.